Hello once again, individuals, and welcome to another episode of the Aesthetic Space Program, the program in which I do career mode as aesthetically as possible. This is episode 2. In episode 1, I launched my first 2 rockets. Now it is time to one-up that and make science. Let's go ahead and see what we can do, alright? So first I'm going to go into research and development and see whether I can buy anything with the 64.7 science that I earned last launch. I guess I'm going to get stability because some of these parts are aesthetically pleasing and they're also kind of good at making your rockets work well. Then there is things along the lines of survivability, which I suppose we can get because it's cheap and such. And then I don't know if I have enough science to get any of these other higher level things, so I guess that we are just going to have to build our next rocket based on that. Let's go ahead and go into the administration's building and see whether or not there are any strategies that we can pursue, because I didn't do this last time. How wonderful. I love how Walt is in a hazmat suit. That kind of is fitting for public relations. I think that I might want to get more science because at the current time, it looks as if I have an absolute boatload of funds, but not quite enough science. So the outsourced research and development is actually really good for this. You can get 1 science for each 35 funds, which actually would be a whole lot of science. So I can go ahead and pump up this commitment, although the initial cost is pretty steep. For 10%, it's some 24,000 funds. I feel as if it is worth doing. So let me go ahead and start this thing off with a 10% commitment and see what we can do from there, okay? Yes, let me do that. Oh, that's wonderful. All right, I have chosen my 2 contracts to test. They were the 2 most prestigious ones. One of them is orbiting Kerbin, which should be pretty easy on this launch. The other one is test the Sepratron 1 splashdown at Kerbin, which should also not be too difficult. So let's go ahead and see whether or not we can launch Mr. Jebediah Kerbin into orbit. And here we have Rocket 3, the 3rd rocket in the lineup. Its part count is slightly below the maximum for this VAB. Its mass is also just a tiny bit below the maximum, although its height, width, and length are well within the normal limits. So let's go ahead and get this thing out onto the pad and then into the air, shall we? Rocket 3 is on the pad and ready for launch. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. And a very nice liftoff as well. So as Rocket 3 ascends into the heavens, we can go ahead and monitor the amount of fuel that these engines are burning, and I can go ahead and cut this central LVT-45 liquid fuel engine to about half of its normal output. This is simply so that these things, the little guys on the side, will burn out before the central engine, which is kind of an important thing. It also means that this rocket is going to slow down a little bit, however, we're still picking up speed again, so everything is going pretty much according to plan. Standing by for a solid booster separation, or liquid booster separation, and oh my god! Things just exploded. That's not great. Well, at any rate, we can go ahead and throttle back up this LVT-45 liquid fuel engine, maybe all the way back up to 100%, just so that we can go ahead and continue up towards the heavens relatively unimpeded. And there we have burnout. I have a feeling that it's time to immediately activate this final LV-909 liquid fuel engine because our apoapsis isn't quite outside of the atmosphere yet. So as we continue to burn upwards until our apoapsis is at about 75 kilometers, let's say, just because I want to have a little bit of room for error, we can go ahead and take a moment to appreciate the beauty of Kerbin and the fact that this rocket, while having about the same part number and mass as the previous one, is actually doing quite a bit better. Yeah, you can see here that our velocity is at 2,200 meters per second. Our periapsis just a fraction of a kilometer below official space, but we are nonetheless considered to be in orbit as our periapsis somehow jumps to 70 kilometers. All right, that's good. That is absolutely fine with me, and we have a full 4 units of liquid fuel remaining that we can go ahead and use later. Let's go ahead and observe the, oh, that's only 2.3 science. That's sad. Let's get a crew report. Nothing there either. Nuts. Alright, well, this isn't going to be a very science-heavy mission, unfortunately. Although in the next mission, we will have the opportunity to go ahead and gain another scientific instrument and use it to do all sorts of wonderful science. So I need to be sure that I land in the oceans here because I want this thing to be able to test the Separatron while splashed down. Thus, this actually seems like a reasonably good point to make the deorbit burn with this ocean on the other side of Kerbin. And I am thus going to go ahead, point at the retrograde marker, and fire up the engines and consume the remaining couple of gallons of fuel. And there we are. Jebediah Kerbin is quite happy with the mission as a whole, as he should be. This third mission was just barely capable of reaching orbit and getting back, but that is plenty enough for me. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this craft's parachutes so that it can safely and softly land in the oceans of Kerbin. I did want this thing to be recovered a little bit closer to the shores of the Kerbal Space Center, but that's all right. You know, Jeb will still be able to land successfully, and that's the important thing. And because we've landed in the ocean, we can go ahead and test this Separatron motor splashed down, which is one of the contracts that we have to fulfill. And that will get a pretty good payoff. Hopefully that will cover the expense of not landing anywhere too close to the Kerbal Space Center. So as we pass down through the final 200 meters towards the cold water below, I suppose that with this landing, the mission will be over just as soon as I go ahead and test the Separatrons and get some mystery goo samples and some data and such. But yes, this was a successful mission, and I am looking forward to the next one in the Aesthetic Space Program. And Jeb's craft has successfully splashed down. It is now oriented on its side, which is kind of how I wanted it to be. However, I would prefer the Separatron motor to be facing up. I'm going to go ahead, turn on the SAS, although that might not be a good idea. Oh no, we still have plenty of electric charge. And just go ahead and fire up that motor. And we have tested the Separatron, which is pretty good. And now, for the final thing in this mission, I'm just going to go ahead and get some data from Kerbin's water, both from Jeb, from the crew report, and from the mystery goo, so that this mission was not a total scientific loss. The goo escapes into the water. Oh dear. All right. Well, I'm going to keep that data even if we can't keep the goo, and go ahead and recover this vessel. Thank you very much for watching this video. Have a wonderful day. Like, favorite, subscribe, and share, please. And I will see you next time with another episode of the Kerbal Space Program. Peace.